You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today I'm going to try to cut through the all-Trump, all-the-time news with two very interesting guests, refreshing voices. One, a film critic, very apt in this Oscar season, and the other, a fine young poet. But before we get to any of that, we have to go inside those headlines. Since we just observed President's Day, here's a tidbit way inside the headlines. Abraham Lincoln may have been a feminist. Well, sort of. Women suffragists, most of whom had been active for years in the abolition of slavery movement, tried to gain Lincoln's support for women's suffrage, but he wasn't forthright regarding his views on women. Suffragists, however, invoked him for their cause, claiming that he'd said women should vote. They put a quote from him on signs designed by a suffragist from Missouri, which helped convince Missouri to pass votes for women. The quote was, "I go for all sharing the privileges of government who assist in bearing its burdens, by no means excluding women." Well, it sounds good, but unfortunately later scholars pointed out that the words were taken out of context, and what Lincoln had added, but the suffragists declined to add, was another sentence. "Consequently, I go for admitting all whites, white people, all whites, to the right of suffrage, who pay taxes or bear arms, by no means excluding females." Close quote. Well, as it turned out, his sentiment was kind of irrelevant to women's suffrage anyway, since at the time he was a member of the Illinois House of Representatives only, and also women hadn't yet won the right to own property, pay taxes, or bear arms, and only property-owning white males could vote. So women were already automatically excluded from his proposed rights of suffrage. So he didn't really support women's suffrage, although suffragists decidedly supported him and his policies regarding abolition of slavery. Well, now to some contemporary news. Back home, Donald Trump declared that the press was the enemy of the people. He followed his manic, disjointed press conference with a Florida rally repeating the accusations. Subsequently, his press secretary and spokespeople backpedaled and tried to present a changed, different Trump. More about that later in Fighting Words at the end of our program. But declaring the press the enemy of the people was so startling that even Chris Wallace of Fox News said it crossed the line. Nor is it only external censorship that threatens a free press in this kind of climate. Here's an example of self-censorship in mid-February in San Antonio, Texas, at a PBS station. The story began when Representative Lamar Smith said on the floor of the House of Representatives, while criticizing the press for reporting on Trump, quote, "Better to get your news directly from the president. In fact, it might be the only way to get the unvarnished truth," close quote. Well, Rick Casey, host of a weekly public affairs program on KLRN, public station, commented, "That's been tried elsewhere. North Korea comes to mind." The station's president, Arthur Emerson, cut that commentary and replaced it with an older one, claiming concern that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which provides financing for public stations, was under attack, and this would add to it. Fortunately, journalism's salvation lies with the people who appreciate it and like facts and real news, and free speech. After Casey's commentary ran as planned in the San Antonio Express News, readers noticed that it differed from the televised commentary, and the story of what happened began to surface and circulate, reaching Evans Smith, who co-founded the Texas Tribune and is on the PBS board. He put pressure on Emerson, and Emerson agreed to let Casey's original segment run, labeled Commentary. But it's too close a call. Women's groups have begun campaigning to persuade colleges to maintain the Obama administration's rigorous policies for protecting on-campus women from sexual assault in a proactive mobilization due to predictions that the Trump administration will relax enforcement. Such groups as End Rape on Campus, the Association of Title IX Administrators, the National Women's Law Center, and others held a call-in to the Education Department demanding that the new Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, commit to enforcement of the current federal sexual assault guidelines. The proactive strategy is a good model for other issues threatened by Trump. For example, an executive order not yet signed but reportedly imminent, deceptively titled Moratorium on New Multilateral Treaties, calls for a review of all current and pending treaties with more than one other nation. It asks for study and recommendations on which negotiations or treaties the United States should leave. The Paris Climate Agreement and other environmental treaties could fall under this order, and an explanatory statement that actually accompanies the order itself specifically mentions CEDAW, the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. People still celebrating the withdrawal of Andrew Puzder from nomination as Secretary of Labor may have thought that Trump's next candidate for the post, R. Alexander Acosta, seemed an improvement, but he brings his own problems. A decade ago, Acosta, then U.S. Attorney in Miami, played a central role in signing on to a very lenient plea deal given to Jeffrey Epstein, a mega-rich defendant accused of paying underage girls for sexual services. This is going to resurface in the headlines soon with a legal case brought against one of Epstein's associates, Ghislaine Maxwell, by Virginia Giuffre, who is allegedly one of Epstein's victims. Giuffre accused Maxwell of helping to procure underage girls for sexual activities with Epstein, and Maxwell is suing her for defamation. Anyway, back in 2005, Epstein hired a top defense team, including Alan Dershowitz, and Acosta, then top federal prosecutor in Miami, struck a deal where Epstein pled guilty to one count of soliciting prostitution and another of procuring a person under 18 for prostitution. This deal has often been cited as an example of the way weak or corrupt prosecutors buckle under pressure brought by high-powered lawyers and wealthy clients. You know, it makes one wonder how the Trump camp manages to assemble such inept, unqualified, bizarre men as cabinet nominees. Although we heard a lot about Apple and Google and some other tech giants publicly criticizing Trump's travel ban, the older tech companies went to radio silence. That included IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Qualcomm, Cisco, Dell, and Oracle. Meanwhile, 126 other companies did sign on to the amicus brief against the ban. But an activist push at the older firms for them to become involved is being led, and it's being led by women. At Oracle, 3 young women started a petition to encourage the company to join the brief, and hundreds of employees have signed on. At IBM, women have been in vocal revolt, calling IBM's decision not to actively stand up to the Trump administration extremely disturbing. IBM, on its part, released a statement claiming they had conveyed the company's views directly to the president and the Secretary of Homeland Security, and they also noted that the company would never participate in the building of a Muslim registry. Oh, how heroic, IBM. IBM still maintains that accounts of its role in Hitler's regime are overblown and incendiary. As for Irene Scher, a regional vice president for sales at Oracle, her reasons for pressuring her company were clear and public. We participated in the Women's March. We're feeling a heightened sense of civic responsibility. And one last item. As Black History Month ends and we prepare for Women's History Month in March, and then after that we return to the other 10 white, straight, male history months of the calendar, a note about Emmett Till, the 14-year-old African-American child, who was lynched in Mississippi in 1955. Just last month, the white woman tied to the lynching murder finally told the truth. Carolyn Bryant Donham spoke with Professor Timothy Tyson at Duke University, who has written a book about Till. In it, Dunham acknowledges her long-ago allegations that the boy had grabbed her and was menacing and sexually crude were not true. The two white men accused of murdering Till, who later admitted it in a Look magazine interview, were acquitted by an all-white, all-male jury and then couldn't be retried, and they died long ago. Carolyn Bryant Dunham, now 82, told Tyson that her husband's family had hidden her away and moved her from place to place for days after the lynching to keep her from talking to law enforcement, and she said that Roy Bryant, whom she later divorced, was physically abusive to her. But that doesn't explain why later on, and for 6 decades thereafter, she kept silent. She did say of Emmett, "Nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to him." Well, the truth does out, and cold comfort that it is to those not alive to witness truth's rebirth. That's how human beings evolve to slowly civilize ourselves. Perhaps the arc of the universe does bend toward justice, after all. It's time for a brief pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, but I'll be back directly with my first guest, a very apt and timely one, since this is Oscar season, Ann Hornaday, the chief film critic for the Washington Post. So get that popcorn ready and settle down.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back. My first guest is Ann Hornaday, who I met years ago when she was working at Ms. Magazine as a researcher and an editorial assistant, and I was an editor. And she was smart and wonderful even then. She eventually began to write about movies for the New York Times Arts and Leisure section, and in 1995 became the movie critic at the Austin American-Statesman in Austin, Texas, and then went to the Baltimore Sun to be movie critic there, and began working at the Washington Post in 2002. She is now the chief film critic for the Washington Post and was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Criticism in 2008. She's smart and funny and just wonderful. Ann Hornaday. Ann, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Robin.
First of all, as you well know, the Women's Media Center has come out with a 2017 analysis of gender and Oscar nominations at a glance, which is up on the womensmediacenter.com site. And it ain't good news. You know, what are we going to do? I mean, it's. I've mentioned this before on the program, but the nominations for all 19 non-acting categories, women got nominated. Only 20% are women.
Right.
You know, and zero in original screenplay, 0 in directing.
Right. And that comports, unfortunately, with similar findings that our friend Martha Lausen gets. She's, of course, the director of the Center for the Study of Women in Television and Film at San Diego State, and she always comes up with such interesting statistics. And she found that around 17%, that women account for about 17% of those jobs, those sort of below-the-line jobs. And, you know, that is really where the rubber hits the road, because I think every year we're looking at those high-profile categories like director, like the leading actors, to look for inclusion and representation, and that's important. It's important on a lot of levels, but really the equity happens, as you note, in those crew positions.
Yeah,
and that is very much, you know, the ACLU called for a study. The U.S. government, the EEOC, is looking very hard at discriminatory employment and hiring practices in Hollywood. I don't see anything like a government decree coming down, but I do see people like Ava DuVernay, who very consciously and positively hired only women for her Queen Sugar crew and proved that it's doable.
Right.
And Ryan Murphy is also doing that as a producer and as a cultural creator, and he has vowed. And I think you and I are old enough. It's like that is affirmative action. Literally,
exactly.
That is taking an affirmative action. It's not a quote. It's not a quote unquote quota. It's not quota. It's not all those canards that have been trotted out. It's simply seeing a problem, and we can talk about why it's a problem. I doubt your audience needs to know why. They know why. And just doing something about it and proving that it can be done. So I do see some progress on that level, and I also see some interesting projects coming up this year that are female-centered and female-directed and created. So we just have to kind of keep, God bless Patricia Arquette and Catherine Hardwicke and other female filmmakers who have really kept this issue very prominent, and it's not going to go away this time. It has been raised before, and it has been subsumed or submerged, but I really get the sense from everybody I talk to in the industry that they are staying on this.
Yeah, well, that's actually encouraging.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I recently wrote something about I could see a direct line about why that matters in this movie 50 Shades of Grey.
I'm looking at the review right this minute. I pulled it. Yes, indeed. Go on. Because
the first installment, as we know, was adapted, and the screenplay was by a woman, and it was directed by a woman, Sam Taylor Johnson.
Right.
And as much as I'm not a fan of that narrative and that book and the whole thing, I did feel that first movie did fold in some critique and some self-awareness and self-consciousness on the part of the female protagonist about the problematic dynamics of that relationship.
Right.
That was those sort of subtleties and nuances were completely absent in this new film, which, guess what, written and directed by men.
Uh-huh.
And I honestly, you can't prove it in a court of law. You cannot quantify these things, but I really do think that just what you just said, when you have women in those positions of being able to shape a narrative and being able to say, hey, wait a minute, why don't we add this? Or, it's just that on that granular level that it makes a huge, huge impact.
Well, we do what we know we can quantify because Martha Lausen just recently did it. In the new studies, films with at least one woman director and/or writer featured higher percentages of female protagonists and higher percentages of major female characters and females in speaking roles than in films with exclusively male directors and/or writers. So that the numbers can be quantified. The nuances can't, and the nuances, just saturate all filmmaking. So
exactly.
Tell us, since the only thing that I had time to drag myself to see, because I needed to see something to get my mind off obsessing about what's happening to our country, was Arrival, and I was very glad that I did. I loved that movie, and did it do well? Has it gone?
Oh,
yes,
it's done astonishingly well, and because of people like you, because it happened to have opened in theaters the Friday after Election Day. I had seen it in September at the Toronto Film Festival, and I was knocked out. I just thought I was so not prepared for the emotional experience of watching that film and the aesthetic experience. I mean, it's such an interesting kind of deconstruction of the sci-fi genre. I mean, it's just fascinating on so many levels, and it is a deeply humanist piece of work with an absolutely resonant message and emotional core to it. So along comes our election day, and I thought, oh God, no one's going to go see it. They're going to just be so burned out, or they're going to be so kind of paralyzed like I was that weekend. I didn't want to leave the house.
I just kept throwing up.
And lo and behold, it ended up doing incredibly well. And what's interesting about that is that one of the subtexts, or not even subtext, one of the texts of the whole film is about welcoming the stranger and kind of letting down your paranoid, xenophobic assumptions about immigrants, or at least about recent arrivals, who don't look like you and who are, that you call alien. And so it's all about communication and language and breaking down those barriers. And so not only was I heartened by the fact that a good movie did well, but that it just was so in gentle but strong opposition to the
other message.
to the message that happened to have won that night. And so it's continued to do really well. It's a great example of a movie that can leverage award season attention to really do extraordinarily well at the box office, which is important because it shows Hollywood. A studio did not produce this movie. It was actually independently produced and then picked up by a studio. So I think as a proof of concept for movie studios that these sorts of movies can make you money. I always go back to that Meryl Streep line that she gave in a speech a few years ago where she's like, "What's the matter? Don't you want the money?"
That's right.
I mean, these movies do well, and it's a female-centered narrative, by the way.
Oh, is it ever? Yeah.
Yeah, a very strong female center character who's a
But it's neither. So, it's a whole new third thing, which actually reflects, what to me is reality. I mean, it's neither an old-fashioned chick lit. Flick. But neither, nor is it the new. I can kill as many men and look at me, strap on my armor. I'm as imitation of a guy. That's my new female hero. Male impersonator.
Yeah,
it's neither of those things. It's a whole other thing, and that's what I loved about it. I've also heard
and she's an intellectual too, which I know you know. I mean, she's an academic. God bless them.
I know it. We can say this on this program. If we were to say it anywhere else, it could totally doom the movie. But it's a smart as well as moving movie. I mean, it really is. And talk to me about 20th century women, which I have to go see because apparently sisterhood is powerful is all through it.
Oh, Robin, I cheered when I saw that. It was just so wonderful. This is an utterly terrific. It's just I can't say enough about this movie. It's been written and directed by Mike Mills, who did a movie a few years ago called Beginners, which was inspired by his father's coming out as a gay man very late in life, and kind of discovering passion and love and identity in this very exhilarating, exuberant way. And so this is a movie that pays homage to his mother. And the woman in the film is played, the mom in the film is Annette Bening, and she's a single mom raising a 15-year-old boy, which I'm sure you can remember.
I can relate to
those days. And she's trying to make a good man. She's trying to raise and it's interesting because she would never, the character in the film doesn't identify as a feminist necessarily, but he does. And at a certain point he says, I think I'm a feminist. And I was talking to Barry Jenkins, who directed Moonlight, which is a very leading contender for the awards this year. Yes. And both of these films are really about the construction of male identity and the construction of gender and the kind of the social forces that come into play and the kind of fight that men have to wage in order to break out of all of those stereotypes. And it's so deeply moving. I mean, it's so moving to watch these movies that honoring that struggle.
This is a cause for celebration.
Putting it and centering it. It's really cool.
Yeah, this is a cause for celebration that kind of subject matter has actually made it to the big screen.
Absolutely, and it's very much, I think, a function of that generation. I mean, they're really, these are the young men, who are probably my generation and a little bit younger, for whom this is part of the warp and weft of their lives. It's just, you're right. I mean, it's incredibly heartening. So while we can celebrate female-centered narratives, we can also celebrate that male narratives are changing.
Well, and also, there was not only Oscars so male, but Oscars so white. And Loving and Fences and Hidden Figures, all of which are on my, as the minute that I can breathe and get a little sleep and be ready to focus my eyes, I want to see.
I know. And you'll be glad. And, I would put Fences in with that male identity.
Yes, somebody told me that.
Bunch, because that's very much about the construction. And it's also about the historical forces that create a person. Yeah. And they're just very aware. And Hidden Figures, oh my goodness. I mean, that's right up our alley. That is the one that during this sad winter of our discontent, I could confidently send just about everybody to and say, you will leave feeling a lot better. I mean, it's just a shot of pure joy and beauty, and it's a story I sure had never heard, and just the best actresses, and it's just a wonderful it earns every bit of its uplift.
It reminds us also, I think, of the crucial importance of art, in the political realm, in the real world realm, in the keep yourself sane and stop gibbering realm.
Sure.
And of course, right at a time when they want to now erase the National Endowment for the Arts. But that is another conversation.
Indeed.
You are your usual, absolutely wonderful, smart self. Will you come back and not make it such a long time next time?
Absolutely. You got my number. I'll go on anytime.
All right. I will call you regularly. Bless your dear heart. And send you big hug and lots of love.
Me too.
And thanks so much for being with us. Thank you, Ann.
Indeed. Thank you, Robin.
Time for another break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. And coming up, my next guest is Donika Kelly, a fine young poet with her first prize-winning book. And also coming up is the Surrealism Corner. So don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And welcome back again. My next guest is Donika Kelly. That's Donika. Donika is a poet, and her debut collection, Bestiary, from Grey Wolf Press, was selected by Nikki Finney for the 2015 Cave Canem Poetry Prize. Donika Kelly holds an MFA in writing from the Michener Center for Writers at the University of Texas at Austin, and in 2013 she received a PhD in English from Vanderbilt, where she specialized in American literature and film studies. She's a Cave Canem Graduate Fellow and a 2004 June Fellow of the Bucknell Seminar for Younger Poets. Her poems have appeared widely in various literary journals, and she is an assistant professor at St. Bonaventure University, where she teaches creative writing. Donika, welcome to the program, and I'm so glad you're here.
I'm happy to be with you, Robin. This is so exciting.
Well, you've written a really wonderful book, and that it's a first book of poems. It's a first, yes?
Yes, it is my first collection.
What an accomplishment. It's already longlisted for the 2016 National Book Award for Poetry. It won the 2015 Cave Canem Poetry Prize, and it's called Bestiary. It's a remarkable book of poems, especially for a first book of poems, my God. And you had me at the title because my first book of poems was called Monster. Mm-hmm. And a little later on, I did a book of poems called Lady of the Beasts. So the minute I saw Bestiary, I thought, that's a sister. We're talking claws and fangs and an exotic, a powerful beauty that is often misunderstood. We're talking a lot of things here. I must read this book. So congratulations. It was a while in the making, eh? The book.
It was. I started writing the poems that eventually made the book in 2008. And I just, that was after my MFA. Very few of my poems from the MFA program at the Michener Center made it into the book. I think maybe one. And so it was all work that I did after I went through what I think of as a pretty good apprenticeship program in terms of thinking about art and centering art and poems. So, but I didn't rush it. Right. I wasn't in a hurry. I wanted to make a good book.
And the mythological monsters and the monsters of memory and the monsters of nightmare that are and are not powerful. I mean, where did you first begin to wrestle with this imagery?
So when I was in the fourth grade, I have a very specific sort of memory of this. When I was in the fourth grade, I was a student in the LA Unified School District, which the part of LA that I lived in, Los Angeles I lived in, did not have a lot of money. I was in like South Central. And so the fact that we had a library was kind of strange. Like looking back, I'm like, whoa, like that was kind of amazing. And my fourth grade classroom was right across the hall from that library. And one day we went, and I found Delaire's book of Greek myths and it's a beautiful book. The illustrations are beautiful. It's a big book, like it's like very tall. And I was enthralled. I devoured that book.
Yeah.
And right around that same time, my father started abusing me sexually. And so I think that there was something about the fallibility of the gods.
Yes.
The just sheer volume of incest.
Yeah.
In those myths, and the fact that the gods just they didn't, like, there were no consequences for their actions, right? Like, they could harm mortals in particular kinds of ways, and there were no consequences for that. If there were consequences, it was between the gods, and even then, they didn't seem to be that great.
Enormous, indifferent power, you know.
And I lived under that, I think, for like from the time I was about 8 until I was 13, but then when my father stopped abusing me, but still sort of lived with that, like, you know. And
your mother was unable to protect you?
She didn't know for a long time, and once she did, that did not go well.
Yeah.
And part of that is she had her own issues with addiction, and so. But
it's the transformation of that into art, not into just therapy, important as that may be, but into something that is transformative. And you've done that somehow in Bestiary. I mean, the rhythms of the poems, the scope of the poems, and the imagery. Oh my God! It's just, you know, I feel like I've died and gone to heaven, you know. I mean, just, you damn the moon in its darkness. There's just so many. Werewolves are here, listeners, and centaurs, and mermaids, and, and then there's also real ones like ostriches and whales and swallows, but the mix is a populated universe of different kinds of intelligences that are sometimes malevolent and sometimes not, sometimes benevolent, and it's a very rich universe that you have inhabited and created for us.
I mean, I feel like it's the world in which I live, where, I mean, there are a few things sort of at play in terms of how I think about those different levels of intelligences. The first is that I don't know that human intelligence is the highest form of intelligence. It seems to be the one that we privilege. But we seem to be like quite a dumb animal.
You think? Especially the one occupying the White House.
I mean, particularly, right?
Not a credit to the species. Not a credit.
I mean, yes, absolutely. I think that's correct. But also, I think that, along those same lines, there are so many different ways to be intelligent as a human, right? And to be intelligible as a human. And that intelligibility of humanness can sometimes, at least to my way of thinking, can depend on being connected to the not human.
Yes.
Not in a comparative way to say, well, you know, I am not that, so I must be this, but that we have some kind of connection to each other that seems worth exploring and thinking about and sitting with. And so in the book, I try not to, I mean, in my work and in the way that I think about sort of different kinds of intelligences and consciousnesses, I try not to reinforce that hierarchy, to say that the human is better than or higher than. I also think that comes out of a feeling of not always being perceived as human because I'm black and a woman and a lesbian and I grew up poor. And so there's so many ways that I'm dehumanized that, like, if I privilege the human over all other ways of being, then
it would,
where do I fit in
where do
that?
You fit in, particularly when the default for human is a white, straight male? Robin Cost Lewis, who is also a wonderful poet, and also
a beautiful poet,
beautiful poet, and who survived childhood of sexual abuse as well, was on the program a while ago, some months ago, and we were talking about this as well. There is an explosion of not consciousness but visibility now too late, but still in time, of an extraordinary series of voices of young women who are African American and women of color in general, but particularly African American. And the poetry that is coming from that quarter is something else with a capital S and E. I think it is very much the future of American poetry. And positioning the human, as you do, within a spectrum of life and consciousness, is a very interesting political act. Not that poetry exists for political reasons, but it does have an effect, and I think a very salutary one, Would you read one of the poems for us, please?
Absolutely. Always happy to do that. So it's one of my great pleasures.
Oh, please. Oh, good. Goody.
So the poem I am about to read is called Little Box.
I love that poem. Yeah. It's
So, Little Box. The woman you love is afraid she is hurting you. This is the source of her fear. You are afraid to say, I am hurting. You are crying. You are afraid your parents will discover that you are crying again and send you again to therapy, where a woman with long hair and a long skirt will point to the dollhouse and ask where the mother doll sleeps, and the father, and, if they have a child, where the child doll sleeps. You speak in therapy. Every statement begins, I feel, even when you mean, why are you hurting me? You'd rather be a simpler animal. You try to imagine what the bear feels, the seal, the otter, always a little group of 3. You worry they are not, in fact, simpler, but you are sure they are never lonely. You hate your loneliness as you hated yourself as a child. You are bored with your hatred. You want her to stop hurting you. You want to say, I love you, again and again. This will change nothing, and you've already said it. When you were a child in therapy, you understood where each doll went. You learned not to cry. There's no teacher now to tell your parents in any way your mother doesn't remember you, and you are settling into hating your father, though you are afraid you are as careless and cruel as they taught you to be. You will see your therapist in 2 weeks. Her hair is short, and she is from the same city as the woman you love. You will tell her you are sad and hurting. You will be matter of fact. You will think of the seal, a mother perhaps, how she might be lonely for a lost pup. But there will be another, and she will forget the one that was eaten by an orca or a polar bear or neglect. You will tell your therapist none of this. You will no longer speak to the woman who has your heart. You will put her in the room farthest away from your own. She will sleep where the father should be.
Oh,
thank you.
Bravissima, my dear. Wow. Well, thank you, Donika, for the poem, for the book, for all the books that are yet to come. It's so exciting now that I'm 112,000 years old and and rapidly. It's so exciting to see, and still trucking, but nonetheless, it's so exciting to see younger voices that are female and strong and visionary and beautiful and lyrical and fierce at the same time. It just brings tears of delight to my eyes. So thank you for existing. Thank you for the book, which is Bestiary, and we've been talking, and it's from Grey Wolf Press, and it's from Donika Kelly, who is a winner of the 2015 Cave Canem Poetry Prize and a wonderful poet. The book is Bestiary. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Robin, and thank you for making the space. I'm so grateful for it.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. A federal appeals court has cleared the way for Florida doctors to talk to their patients about gun safety, overturning a 2011 law that pitted medical providers against the state's powerful gun lobby. This means doctors can no longer be threatened with losing their licenses for asking patients if they own guns and for discussing gun safety, because to do so would violate their free speech. Thank you, appeals court. Surreal. According to a Public Religion Research Institute poll, when people claim to be Christian and commit violence in the name of Christianity, 75% of Americans say that person wasn't really Christian. But when people claim to be Muslim and commit violence in the name of Islam, only 50% of Americans say that person isn't really Muslim. Isn't it time we named Christian bigotry properly as Christian supremacy, right up there alongside white supremacy and male supremacy? We should all keep an eye out for the surreal non-logic in Trump's executive order requiring federal agencies to eliminate at least 2 regulations for every new one issued. For instance, the EPA would be forced to repeal limitations on certain pollutants, mercury, say, in order to impose new regulations like the updated limits on lead in drinking water that are on the agency's agenda this year. That's crazy. Texas State Senator Charles Schwertner, Republican chair of the Texas Senate Committee on Health and Human Services, had a meltdown while listening to women testify about their need for abortion access. He had introduced and was defending a bill banning donations of fetal tissue from abortions to science, and his legislation was bundled with 2 other anti-abortion bills, one to throw out the safest abortion procedure for second trimester, and the other to mandate all abortion remains be buried or cremated. It took only 10 minutes of women testifying for him to try to cut off dialogue and then to begin banging the table. Finally, he banged so hard he broke the glass in his attempt to silence the women. He then claimed he'd only been concerned about running over the time allotted for public testimony and immediately thereafter permitted a representative from the anti-abortion group Texas Right to Life to speak for twice as long as any of the women had. And here are 3 new entries for our category, Bit the Dust. I confess I really like this category. Bit the Dust. Utah's James Green, vice chair of the Wasatch County Republican Party, in a letter published by the Park Record and the Wasatch Wave, held forth that paying women equally would ruin the makeup of the traditional family, that having more women in the workforce would create competition for, quote, even men's jobs, close quote, which would in turn lower the pay for all jobs and force more and more reluctant mothers who should be home into the workforce. Because it's actually not the year 1017, but the year 2017, the Utah Women's Coalition took to social media with a vengeance. Green has now written an apology and resigned from his post. That was within 2 days. Bit the Dust. Nebraska State Senator Bill Kintner, who calls himself a fighter for having survived a cyber sex scandal, got into hot water all over again, this is the 3rd time, for an offensive retweet about the Women's March. A photo of 3 older women marchers with a sign referencing Trump's comments about women had been retweeted with the line, "Ladies, I think you're safe." In other words, not attractive enough to be assaulted. This time, after the explosion from women constituents, Kintner said, "I have concluded that it is wise to step down as a member of the Nebraska legislature." You think, Bill? Bit the Dust. Milo Yiannopoulos, Trump worshipper and Steve Bannon protege, alt-right male supremacist and exhibitionist who was banned from Twitter for racist remarks, that Milo Yiannopoulos was bumped from addressing CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, following an outcry among conservatives about his comments on the glories of child sexual abuse. Although he tried to wiggle out of his videotaped statements, he was also dropped by Simon & Schuster publisher, who had contracted for a reported $250,000 advance. Finally, even Breitbart dumped him. Author Roxane Gay had earlier withdrawn her own Simon & Schuster contract in principled protest against their having signed Yiannopoulos for a book to begin with. Last, who could forget Trump's press conference last month and his disgustingly dismissive response to journalist April Ryan of American Urban Radio Networks when she asked him if he planned to meet with the Congressional Black Caucus. First, she had to explain what the CBC was. Then, Trump grandly said he'd meet with them and directed her to set up the meeting. When she reminded him that she was a White House press corps correspondent, he continued nonetheless to order her arrange a meeting. People on and off air were stunned at the blatant racism inherent in his remarks, but alone among male commentators, John Oliver noticed what most women, black and white, also noticed, that Trump's response was profoundly sexist as well. In his surreal Trump universe, apparently not only do all black people know each other, but all women are naturally secretaries. And it's time for one last break. I'm Robin Morgan. This is Women's Media Center Live, but it's not over yet. I'll be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again with some fighting words. In a shade over 1 month, Trump has already lost a court fight and a cabinet nomination battle, fired an acting attorney general and the national security advisor, been rejected by 3 high-profile invited cabinet replacements, had to withdraw a cabinet nominee and a proposed army chief, commandeered a disastrous military raid, held an historically catastrophic press conference, and garnered an unprecedented low, under 39% American approval. But one stringently scripted speech at the National African American History Museum and one interview in which he finally was forced to say he didn't actually approve of increasing anti-Semitic and racist attacks, and GOP leaders and even some TV pundits are ecstatic that he is maturing into the office of the presidency. This is not the audacity of hope. This is the stupidity, or, to be generous, the naivete of hope. Similarly, while many are falling over sideways with relief at the appointment of a so-called grown-up, General H.R. McMaster, as the new National Security Advisor, I, for one, can't lose sight of this creating a powerful troika of generals, in the first-ever administration to have all 3 top security jobs filled by military men at the same time, teaming McMaster with Defense Secretary Jim Mattis and Secretary of Homeland Security John F. Kelly, both retired 4-star Marine generals. Having the military in traditionally civilian posts of command is reminiscent of banana republics and reminiscent of Praetorian guards around Caesar. And that's not good, people. Meanwhile, folks are being dragged away from Standing Rock. Meanwhile, new immigration guidelines call for hiring thousands of additional enforcement agents, expanding the pool of immigrants who are prioritized for removal, speeding up deportation hearings, and enlisting local law enforcement to help make arrests. As for ethics, they're going to hell in a handbasket. The Trump family claims they are withdrawing from more than a dozen planned international deals, although they have managed to grandfather in and proceed with resorts, hotels, or golf courses in Indonesia, Mumbai, Gurgaon, India, Uruguay, Dubai, and the Dominican Republic. And they are expanding plans in 26 major metropolitan areas inside the United States, particularly in Dallas, Seattle, Denver, and San Francisco. Red alert, citizens of those cities. Wary of public negativity at the name Trump, they're launching these new acquisitions under a new brand, Scion, S-C-I-O-N. Haha. All this will need approval from local governments, so do be aware and on the alert, and do inquire. Trump greed makes Gordon Gekko look like St. Francis. Having raised the membership fees for Mar-a-Lago, the so-called Winter White House, Trump is refusing to pay his share of a staggering bill the taxpayers are footing. His elaborate lifestyle, and that of his family spread worldwide, is putting a huge burden on the Secret Service and the Treasury. Each trip to Mar-a-Lago costs an average of $3.5 million, including money for Coast Guard units to patrol the exposed shoreline and other military security and staffing expenses. Trump, of course, refuses to use nearby Camp David, the traditional weekend presidential retreat, which is a short helicopter ride from the White House. Palm Beach County officials are begging Washington to reimburse them tens of thousands of dollars a day and expenses for deputies handling security and traffic. New York City is paying $500,000 a day to guard Trump Tower, according to police estimates, an amount that could reach $183 million a year. No estimates are in yet on round-the-clock costs for protecting and guarding Trump's golf retreat in Bedminster, New Jersey. Secret Service and U.S. Embassy staff paid nearly $100,000 in hotel room bills to support Eric Trump's business trip to Uruguay. Eric and his security detail also flew to the Dominican Republic for meeting with developers on a Trump luxury resort, and just the advance trip of Secret Service officials cost $5,500. On top of that, the Trump brothers zipped to Dubai for the weekend, costing the Secret Service $16,000 in hotel bills alone, and they're off to Vancouver on February 28th for the opening of a Trump skyscraper, and there's no estimated cost in yet on that one. Whenever Trump decides to give a new campaign speech and arrives on Air Force One, as he did last week, remember that Air Force One costs an estimated $200,000 an hour to fly, as well as assorted watercraft, military working dogs, rental cars, hotel rooms, and the Coast Guard rescue helicopter, which has to stand by wherever he goes. As for his neighbors in Palm Beach, they're wretched. A local airport lost $200,000 in fuel sales during a single Trump visit, since all planes were grounded for security. It costs $60,000 a day to pay overtime to sheriff's deputies who guard the closed roads for security, a tab that's approaching $1.5 million since the election. Due to traffic and road closures, restaurants have stood empty, and some are now having to consider closing. And Miami-Dade County formally abandoned its status as a sanctuary for unauthorized immigrants, backing cowardly Mayor Carlos Jimenez's recent decision to mollify Trump by detaining jailed inmates sought for deportation by the government. More than 150 people went to County Hall to deliver an impassioned defense of South Florida's reputation of proud diversity and to plead to retain the sanctuary status. But after the county commissioners voted to drop that status 9-3, the crowd cried, "Shame on you, and may God have mercy on your soul." We're entering into a dicey period here, people. The Trumpists are counting on expectations being so lowered that the slightest sign of humanity or flicker of intelligence emanating from Trump and his regime will assuage our righteous fury. They're also depending on us, democracy defenders, to tire of the grassroots uprising that is gorgeously evident across the country, to tire of demanding that our representatives do their jobs. They ain't seen nothing yet, but they're hoping that simple erosion of energy plus time, combined with a few scripted, superficial comments and gestures, will make it all go away. This is the time to step up our pace and our intensity. And here are 2 new tools to help us do it. The Town Hall Project, townhallproject.com, lists times, dates, and places for you to meet with your members of Congress, not only at their town halls, but at their district offices. And resistancecalendar.org calls itself the one-stop shop to find and add to demonstrations and actions of all sorts across the country. That's townhallproject.com and resistancecalendar.org. Now that is the activism of hope. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter and be sure to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's it for today. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com for the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to our show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. And you can check out my own website and blog at robinmorgan.net and find me on Facebook and Twitter, too. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, and our founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us, and don't forget to join us next week right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.